Hollywood's golden age was a world of glittering gowns, flashing cameras and smiles that could light up an entire theater. But behind every red carpet, behind every sparkling premiere, there were stories Hollywood preferred no one would ever hear. Stories of betrayal, manipulation, and power wielded with a cold, ruthless hand. And no one saw it all quite like Burt Lancaster. Born on November 2, 1913, in the rough, unforgiving streets of East Harlem, Lancaster's life began far from the glitz of Tinseltown. The son of an Irish-American working-class family, he was raised on lessons of toughness, independence, and survival. Life in Manhattan's East Harlem was unforgiving. It demanded grit, demanded resilience, and it gave Lancaster the kind of edge that would later make him unstoppable in Hollywood. Before he was an actor, he was a circus acrobat. Alongside his lifelong friend Nick Kevat, Lancaster performed daring stunts for the K Brothers Circus, balancing on wires, leaping through flames, and commanding the attention of thousands. Those years in the circus were more than just a prelude. They were a training ground for life itself. Lancaster learned to read fear, to control danger, and to move with precision under pressure. It was a skill set that would serve him well in a Hollywood that was often as treacherous as any high wire. And World War II brought another twist of fate. Lancaster joined the U.S. Army's Special Services Unit, entertaining troops across Europe, bringing moments of laughter to soldiers in the darkest hours. But when he returned home, the real stage awaited. A chance encounter with destiny that would lead him to the 1946 noir classic The Killers. Overnight, Burt Lancaster transformed from a disciplined acrobat into a screen phenomenon. Audiences were captivated not just by his physical presence, but by a magnetism that radiated from every pore. Within a decade, Lancaster was not just a star, he was a force. Films like From Here to Eternity, Elmer Gantry, Birdman of Alcatraz, and Judgment at Nuremberg cemented his status. But unlike many of his contemporaries, Lancaster refused to be confined to the image Hollywood crafted for him. He co-founded Hecht Lancaster Productions, one of the first independent studios in the City of Dreams, determined to tell stories that were honest, unflinching, and often dangerous in their truth. Off-screen, he was just as formidable. Lancaster marched with Martin Luther King Jr., spoke out against the Vietnam War, and publicly condemned the McCarthy-era witch hunts that had silenced so many. His peers admired his integrity. Audiences loved his intensity. Yet beneath that veneer of respect and charisma, Lancaster began to see cracks in the facade, the hidden cruelty behind the charm, the manipulation behind the smiles. NBY, the 1970s, the glitter of Hollywood's golden era had begun to tarnish. For Lancaster, every handshake and every contract carried echoes of betrayal he had witnessed firsthand. The studios he once navigated with precision were now labyrinths of deceit. Colleagues who smiled for the cameras were capable of unimaginable ruthlessness behind the scenes. And it was in this climate of hidden terror and glittering deception that Lancaster began to write, not for fame, not for revenge, but for confession. NHE called it the most evil of them all. A private manuscript that cataloged the actors and actresses he believed had wielded power to destroy others. It was a map of Hollywood's hidden darkness, written by a man who had seen it all and survived. In Lancaster's world, glamour and cruelty were inseparable, and his words would later reveal just how deep the rot ran beneath the City of Dreams. By the time Burt Lancaster put pen to paper for The Most Evil of Them All, he was no longer the wide-eyed circus acrobat or the dashing Hollywood star. He was a man weathered by decades of secrets, betrayal, and the harsh truths behind the glamour. The golden age of Hollywood had glittered on the outside, but behind the curtains, Lancaster saw something far more sinister. Ambition cloaked in charm, cruelty hidden behind laughter, and manipulation disguised as friendship. NHI's manuscript began with a warning. "Not all smiles are kind," he wrote, and the first name on his list would shock even those who considered themselves insiders. Kirk Douglas, Lancaster's own co-star in Gunfight at the OK Corral and 7 Days in May. To the world, Douglas was the embodiment of strength, charisma, and the rebel who challenged studio power with Spartacus. To Lancaster, however, Douglas was a predator in disguise, a man who thrived on domination, who betrayed friends, and maneuvered ruthlessly to secure every role. According to Lancaster, Douglas's charm wasn't just for the cameras, it was a weapon. He allegedly blacklisted rivals, manipulated producers, and, in Lancaster's view, would have even sacrificed his own son's career if it meant another headline or a stronger position of power. Next came Mickey Rooney, the beloved boy next door of American cinema. On screen, Rooney was energetic, mischievous, and endlessly entertaining. Off-screen, Lancaster painted a far darker portrait. He called Rooney a tyrant of small cruelties, a man who relished humiliating extras and young actresses, turning entire sets into places of fear. Lancaster recalled watching Rooney mock innocent performers for sport, the laughter hiding something far more sinister, a hunger for control and a taste for the helplessness of others. And those 8 failed marriages? Lancaster didn't see misfortune. He saw a pattern of domination and abandonment, a man who could never connect without exerting authority. Then, Lancaster turned his attention to Natalie Wood, the girl everyone thought fragile and vulnerable. He labeled her the siren with a secret. According to Lancaster, Wood wielded her emotions like weapons, crying on cue, manipulating producers, and ensuring rivals were fired or written out. Her mysterious death in 1981 haunted him. "The sea didn't take her," he once told a confidant. Hollywood did. In Lancaster's eyes, Wood symbolized the cost of deception in a world that rewarded manipulation as much as talent. Elizabeth Taylor was next, the Diamond Queen of drama. Lancaster described her as a storm wrapped in silk. Cleopatra had been a masterclass in chaos, he wrote, with Taylor halting production over trivial disputes, turning sets into arenas of tension. Her multiple marriages, her scandals, they weren't tragedies, Lancaster argued. They were strategic tools, weapons she used to bend Hollywood to her will. She didn't merely act. She commanded, controlled, and reshaped every room she entered. These first few entries revealed a pattern. Behind the glamour and applause lurked personalities capable of inflicting fear, controlling outcomes, and reshaping careers to suit their desires. Lancaster's manuscript was not gossip. It was a ledger of perceived truths, a confessional account from a man who had seen the underbelly of Hollywood and refused to pretend it didn't exist. In every page, Lancaster's voice carried both sorrow and bitterness. He was documenting betrayal, yes, but also survival, showing how Hollywood created monsters out of necessity, how power, once tasted, corrupted even the most talented. By the end of this section, it was clear that the Golden Age's bright lights had shadows so deep that even those who lived inside them might never fully escape. NTHE masks of Hollywood were many, and Burt Lancaster had begun peeling them away, one name at a time. By the time Burt Lancaster reached the middle of his manuscript, the pattern was unmistakable. The men Hollywood celebrated for virtue, charm, and decency often hid a darkness that the cameras never captured. Lancaster's next entries peeled back the public masks, revealing a world where charisma could conceal cruelty and a gentle smile could disguise calculation. Spencer Tracy was first. To critics and fans, he was the epitome of quiet strength and depth, a disciplined actor who brought gravitas to every role, from Judgment at Nuremberg to countless classics. But Lancaster's words painted a terrifyingly different picture. Tracy, he claimed, was a man whose private storms terrified everyone around him. Alcohol fueled unpredictable rages, turning him from mentor to menace in an instant. Lancaster recalled a moment during filming in 1961 when a minor mistake by a makeup artist supposedly triggered Tracy to smash a bottle in fury. Where the public saw genius, Lancaster saw fear. He didn't just destroy sets, he wrote, he destroyed people. Crew members worked in silence, knowing that crossing him could provoke consequences far beyond criticism. Then came James Stewart, the embodiment of decency, the wholesome heart of American cinema. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, It's a Wonderful Life. To audiences, Stewart was the moral compass of the nation, but Lancaster's portrayal suggested a darker, hidden layer. Behind the warm smile and gentle demeanor lay a man who quietly observed, catalogued, and judged. Stewart allegedly kept meticulous notes on co-stars, mistakes, passing them to directors in a subtle form of sabotage disguised as professionalism. Lancaster even hinted at a shadow side to Stewart's patriotism, suggesting that the star used his reputation to maintain control over casting, subtly keeping certain actors from advancing. And then there was Marilyn Monroe, the icon of vulnerability, the angel of fragility adored by millions. To the public, she was helpless, a wounded goddess in need of protection. But Lancaster's account was chilling. He described Monroe as a master manipulator, using her perceived vulnerability to control men and directors alike. On the set of Some Like It Hot, she allegedly disappeared for hours, leaving everyone waiting, yet never truly needing rescue, because she had orchestrated the attention she received. For Lancaster, her tragic death was not a mystery, but the inevitable conclusion of a life consumed by dependency, charm, and calculated helplessness. Narrow Flynn followed, a man whose dashing charm and swashbuckling roles had made him a legend. But Lancaster saw Flynn as a dangerous, charming predator, someone who turned indulgence and chaos into spectacle. Parties became arenas of excess, exploitation, and fear. Women and men alike were drawn into his orbit, only to be left broken. His repeated brushes with the law, whispered scandals, and seemingly endless escapes from consequence were, to Lancaster, evidence of Hollywood's willingness to shield the guilty when they could entertain the public. Finally, in this section, Lancaster shifted to Bing Crosby, a man whose soothing voice had serenaded millions through the holidays, yet who allegedly wielded cruelty behind closed doors. Lancaster described Crosby as a tyrant at home, a man whose charm masked emotional and physical abuse toward his children. The darker legacy extended to Crosby's eldest son, Gary, who, according to Lancaster, inherited the same patterns of rage and destruction. This, he wrote, was Hollywood's quiet tragedy. The sins of one generation nurtured the darkness of the next. Through these entries, Lancaster's narrative emphasized one undeniable truth: fame could conceal cruelty, and charm could be weaponized. The icons the world trusted most were not immune to the shadows that Hollywood cultivated. Beneath the lights, under the applause, there existed a relentless calculus of power, fear, and control, a world Burt Lancaster had witnessed firsthand. "NTHE City of Dreams," he wrote, was built on shadows, and in those shadows even gentlemen could be devils. If the men of Hollywood concealed cruelty behind charm, the women often masked manipulation behind beauty, vulnerability, and drama. Burt Lancaster's manuscript turned sharply toward these silver-screen sirens, revealing how ambition, emotion, and fear intertwined in ways the public could never imagine. In Lancaster's eyes, the glamorous facades of Hollywood's female icons were not always the truth. They were performances crafted to control, manipulate, and survive. Natalie Wood was first. Everyone adored her innocence and charm, but Lancaster's notes depicted a calculating side hidden beneath those doe eyes. He called her the siren with a secret, someone who weaponized emotion to influence producers, writers, and even co-stars. Tears could secure a rewritten script. A quiet sob could end a rival's chance at a role. Her tragic death in 1981 haunted Lancaster profoundly. "The sea didn't take her," he wrote. "Hollywood did." For him, Wood's fate was a chilling example of a system that rewarded both talent and ruthless cunning, where survival often depended on the ability to manipulate those around you. Elizabeth Taylor followed, a storm wrapped in silk. Lancaster described her as the queen of controlled chaos. On the set of Cleopatra, she allegedly halted production for hours over wardrobe disputes, while the entire crew waited in tension. Her famed marriages and scandals were not, he argued, misfortunes or personal failures. They were tools, weapons she used to bend Hollywood to her will. Taylor could turn an entire production upside down and still command adoration, proving that control, when cloaked in beauty and drama, was a superpower in the City of Dreams. Marilyn Monroe was next, the goddess of fragility. To the world, Monroe's vulnerability was magnetic, inspiring protection and adoration. To Lancaster, it was a lever of influence. She allegedly used her perceived helplessness to manipulate directors and men of power, delaying productions, bending narratives to her favor, and orchestrating attention wherever she went. Her charm was tactical, her tears strategic, and her tragic death, an inevitable result of a life lived in a delicate balance of control and dependence. For Lancaster, she embodied the paradox of Hollywood, angelic on the surface, but capable of wielding power with precision beneath it. Then came Joan Crawford, the iron matriarch of old Hollywood. Lancaster called her a figure who ruled through fear, terrorizing younger actresses, manipulating assistants, and exerting control over everyone who dared step into her orbit. Her household, he wrote, was a palace of discipline, where even her children felt the cold weight of her authority. The stories Christina Crawford would later tell in Mommy Dearest echoed Lancaster's observations. Crawford was not merely a perfectionist, she was a force of domination, a living embodiment of Hollywood's hunger for control at any cost. Finally, Lancaster recorded Lucille Ball, the beloved queen of comedy, the red-haired genius behind I Love Lucy. Millions loved her for laughter, timing, and charm. But Lancaster portrayed Ball as a meticulous, calculating ruler who ran her studio, Desilu Productions, like a private empire. She reportedly micromanaged every detail, from timing on rehearsals to lunch breaks, even keeping private notes on employees' mistakes. Her laughter, he wrote, could save networks while crushing the morale of those beneath her. Hidden microphones, rewritten scripts thrown in staff faces, and an obsession with control painted a portrait of Ball as the ultimate manipulator, warm and funny for the audience, merciless in private. Through these entries, Lancaster revealed a pattern just as dark as the men's. Talent, beauty, and charm could all conceal cold calculation. Every actress, he suggested, was forced to navigate a world where influence could be wielded as both weapon and shield. Fame rewarded those who mastered the balance between illusion and control, and Hollywood's golden age was far less golden than the public believed. In the shadows of the silver screen sirens, Lancaster saw the same truth he had seen in men. Beneath the laughter, beneath the applause, the machinery of power and fear never slept. If Hollywood created monsters, Burt Lancaster argued, it didn't always stop at the silver screen. Some of the darkness, he wrote, was inherited, passed from one generation to the next, cultivated behind closed doors, shielded by fame, and hidden behind the city's sparkling facade. In The Most Evil of Them All, Lancaster exposed a chilling lineage of cruelty that extended beyond the actors themselves. And Bing Crosby, beloved for his velvet voice and classic holiday songs, appeared to the public as a gentle, charming figure. Yet Lancaster portrayed a very different man, a father who ruled with cold authority and fear. Crosby's children lived under constant tension, disciplined harshly, and raised in a home where love was conditional. Behind the public lullabies and Christmas carols was a household of quiet terror, where emotional cruelty was as routine as morning coffee. Decades later, Crosby's eldest son, Gary, would confirm aspects of this in his memoirs, describing years of fear, control, and abuse. For Lancaster, this was evidence that the golden age of Hollywood often thrived on hypocrisy. The men who sang about love and kindness were frequently strangers to it in private. NTHE tragedy, Lancaster noted, did not end with Bing. Gary Crosby inherited more than just fame. He inherited darkness. Raised under constant fear, he grew into a man whose life mirrored the patterns of his father. Addiction, violence, and self-destruction marked his adulthood. He didn't simply carry the scars of his upbringing. He carried the rage, perpetuating the cycle of pain that began long before him. Lancaster used Gary as a symbol of a terrifying truth. Cruelty once planted rarely dies. It spreads, generation to generation, leaving invisible scars that even Hollywood lights cannot illuminate. Henry Fonda was another icon whose public image masked profound personal control. To audiences, Fonda represented moral integrity, the noble father figure, and the righteous juror. But Lancaster's view was unsettling. He saw Fonda as a man of emotional ice, whose stoicism and composure extended from the set into the home, where it became a tool of control. Children learned to tread carefully, for a glance or a word could carry judgment that froze hearts and silenced voices. Fonda's influence was subtle, but for Lancaster, it was a chilling reminder of the invisible cruelty that power could disguise. Jane Fonda, in turn, inherited both the fire and frost of her father. Lancaster called her the revolutionary with a ruthless streak. Her public activism, her outspoken defiance, and her fame, he argued, were all extensions of her desire to dominate, to shape the world around her according to her vision of right and wrong. Compassion and leadership were indistinguishable from control in Lancaster's account. Activism could become a weapon when wielded with intensity and authority. Finally, Joan Crawford and Lucille Ball represented cruelty codified into power. Crawford's iron matriarchy terrorized younger actresses and children alike, teaching fear as a lesson and survival as a rule. Ball, the adored queen of comedy, controlled her studio and staff with precision, punishing mistakes while maintaining a public persona of warmth and humor. Lancaster suggested that these women too were products of Hollywood's unforgiving system, a system that demanded ruthlessness as a prerequisite for survival. Through these entries, Lancaster revealed a pattern. Cruelty in Hollywood was not random. It was inherited, rehearsed, and refined. Fame amplified it, concealment protected it, and the very culture of the industry encouraged its perpetuation. The city of dreams, he argued, was also a city of shadows, where the sins of one generation nurtured the darkness of the next. NFOR, Burt Lancaster Hollywood, was not just a place of stars. It was a breeding ground for monsters, and the monsters often started at home. By the time Burt Lancaster reached the final pages of his manuscript, the weight of decades spent behind the Golden Curtain had taken its toll. He had revealed ruthless actors, manipulative actresses, domestic tyrants, and inherited cruelty, and yet, the most chilling confessions were still to come. Lancaster's final entries focused on the cold, calculating power wielded by Hollywood's public icons, the faces adored by millions, whose private lives were anything but kind. Henry Fonda had already illustrated the quiet terror of stoicism, but Lancaster's observations extended to Jane Fonda. He portrayed her not merely as a political activist or outspoken starlet, but as someone who weaponized her fame and voice. Every cause she championed, every public protest became a platform not just for advocacy but for control. In Lancaster's view, Jane's fire was inseparable from her frost, a legacy inherited from a father who demanded respect and obedience, who measured love with a ruler, and passed that pattern on to his daughter. Compassion, Lancaster argued, could become as sharp as a blade when wielded as a tool of influence. Joan Crawford, whom Lancaster called the Iron Matriarch, represented Hollywood's darkest form of authority. Behind the red carpet glamour and perfectly staged performances was a woman who ruled through fear. Assistants, colleagues, and even her own children were subjected to constant scrutiny and intimidation. Crawford, Lancaster wrote, had mastered the art of control, turning every interaction into a test, every failure into a punishment. Her household was a battlefield where love and fear were indistinguishable, and survival depended on obedience. Crawford's legacy, as Lancaster documented, was a portrait of power stripped of empathy, a reflection of an industry that prized dominance above all else. And then came the final, most shocking entry, Lucille Ball, the beloved queen of comedy. To the world, Ball was warmth, laughter, and charm incarnate, the red-haired genius behind I Love Lucy. To Lancaster, she was a master manipulator and relentless ruler. Her Desilu production studio was described as a private empire, micromanaged with a precision that bordered on obsession. She tracked mistakes in notebooks, installed hidden systems of oversight, and demanded perfection from everyone beneath her, punishing errors with swift dismissal. Lancaster painted her not as a heartless villain, but as a product of the system itself, a woman who learned that control was survival, and survival required vigilance, even ruthlessness. In her laughter and comedic genius, Lancaster saw the ultimate mask, joy for the audience, domination for the insiders. In closing, Lancaster reflected not with vengeance, but with exhaustion. Hollywood, he wrote, was a city built on dreams, yet its foundations were laid in fear, deception, addiction, and ambition. The system demanded compliance from all, including himself. Fame, charisma, and talent could conceal cruelty, charm could mask tyranny, laughter could hide domination. Even those who seemed noble or gentle were not immune to the industry's corrosive influence. Burt Lancaster died in 1994 after years of heart attacks, bypass surgery, and a debilitating stroke that left him partially paralyzed and silenced. His manuscript, the most evil of them all, was never published. If it exists today, it remains hidden, a ghostly testament to the dark side of Hollywood's golden age. For Lancaster, the purpose of writing was not to destroy reputations but to confess, to reveal, and to confront the truth of a system that created monsters as easily as it created stars. And in his final words, he left a haunting message. We were all complicit. The glitter blinded us to evil, even when it wore our own faces.